So hello everyone, today we'll be looking at unpacking the Social Studies 2022 N-level paper. So as you can see from the sources, okay, these are the different type of questions that was tested in 2022. Okay, what does the source tell you? It is really about inference, but just be very careful when they are asking very specific things. They are asking about the policy of working from home. So when you read the sources, you must make sure that you focus on the policy of working from home. Now, question 2 is actually an inference with perspective. Now, what does it mean? It actually means that you need to make a stand. So later on when we unpack source B, you can take a look how supportive is the cartoonist. So you need to agree as well as disagree, and of course you need to make sure that you explain that particular source. Now in this particular year, this question, source B, is actually a cartoon. So you need to look at the different perspective of the cartoonist, and there is a very clear perspective when you observed or when you unpack source B. Okay, now question 3, it is looking at two sources here, and it is a surprise question. However, later on when we unpack this question, there are certain tips that you can use when answering such questions. So sometimes we call this question a hybrid surprise because it requires you to make comparison between source C and source D, and you are supposed to evaluate source C. Okay, and when we evaluate source C, we look at cross-reference. That is why it is called a hybrid surprise. It is a mixture of compare-contrast as well as cross-reference. Now, question 4 is normal. Question 4 is what we've done normally. Okay, it is a utility question. Can you see? The less useful. However, this question is unique because it starts with a statement. And the statement in source E is a personal account. And usually when we look at personal accounts, we always think that a personal account may be biased, maybe one-sided, cannot be trusted. So that's why the question was being asked this way. Does this make the source less useful just because it is a personal account? We'll unpack in a bit. And of course, question 5, our most favorite, is of course taking perspective. And when you read the sources, it does ask you to take a look at the sources and see whether working from home has been a positive experience or it has been a negative experience. So these are the things that as you quickly unpack your questions, you have to keep that in your mind. Okay, so always when we unpack any source-based question, we must make sure that we read the background information. It is definitely important. Now, when you look at this particular background information, you do notice that the question has been set here. Has it been a positive experience for workers or has it been a negative experience for workers? So if you look very carefully, it is really about making sure that you read the background information, understand a little bit, especially if let's say you cannot remember about working from home or studying from home. Okay, and if you actually take note, okay, in this particular source there is a positive experience for many workers. There is also a negative experience, so take note about that. Okay, look at the background information, look at the neutrality of the background information, and always study the sources below to consider whether working from home is a positive or a negative experience. Now, the background information gives you both sides, so I think that is something which is quite unique. All right, let's take a look at source A. It is an announcement by Prime Minister. It is really definitely the start of working from home because of COVID-19. Okay, so if you look very carefully, the question is asking you, what does the source tell you about the policy of working from home? Focused on the word policy. Okay, now look at the ones that's highlighted in blue. Okay, you can see the ones that's highlighted in blue. All right, and then you can decide what is the inference that they're asking you. Okay, so most of the time, an inference, there'll be two inference. It'll be good if you can pick up definitely two. Okay, but if there is no time, at least pick up one main inference. There is this inference, the one that I highlighted in blue, as well as the next few inference, which is in green. So what does this inference mean? Okay, so the one in blue, you can see that actually we will impose, the we here is the government, we will impose significant stricter measures. It will help reduce the risk of a big outbreak. And this comes from obviously the government. So the policy of working from home was mandatory, compulsory, required, a must, imperative. So these are possible inference questions. And if you look at this, it is nothing here is from the source itself. So I want you to remember that in inference, you cannot copy source detail as an inference. Okay? And of course, the normal way of doing inference is, right, we pick the source details from the source and we actually sort of summarize it, all right, that it was necessary to prevent the pandemic from worsening. Okay, so this in blue here corresponds to what it is being highlighted. Now, next in green, the policy of working from home does not apply to key sectors, because you can see all these sectors, supermarket, clinics, hospital, all these are key sectors, and this is done so that life can continue with safe distance measure. So it is really, at the end of the day, when you make an inference, it is to make an informed guess, right? One big tip is make sure that your inference, the one that I highlighted both in blue and green, are not taken from the source. It is supposed to be independent from the source. Okay, so key learning points for question one. Most candidates did well for this. Okay, generally inference made were well supported by details. Just make sure the weaker responses in the national exam did not relate their inference directly on the policy. So it is really about the policy, nothing else. Okay, for the second question, it is a cartoon. And if you look very carefully, the question that they're asking is how supportive is the cartoonist about working from home arrangement? Now, if you look very carefully, this is a 5-panel cartoon. It can happen where they give you a few panel cartoons and you need to interpret. Look at the year, it is in May 2020. It's right smack in the middle of COVID-19 and even circuit breaker. Okay, so the first box that I sort of boxed up in red, you can see the word perfect, you can see the word productive, you can see that it feels as though the cartoonist seems to be supportive. But if you look at the orange color here, you take it as holistic, you can see that the woman here who's working from home is saying that things are less productive. And it is less productive because the child here, we can presume is the daughter, it seems to be disturbing her. So how do you answer this question? Because remember, it is about having a stand, right? Okay, so the cartoonist is not supportive about working from home arrangement because it can be distracting, right? Especially if you need to attend to the needs of your family. And of course, you need to give me or the answer specifically, source details, all right? And these are the challenges of working from home, such as reduced focus and productivity. Hence, the cartoonist is not supportive of working from home. It's always good to sort of end it with a sentence so that you sort of finish up this particular answer. So there have been students who ask me, what if let's say I write that the cartoonist is supportive because I take source details from whatever that is boxed in red? It is not a wrong answer, but of course it is not the best answer. You will never get the full 6 marks. So what are the learning points of this particular question? Most students could illustrate how the cartoonist is supportive or unsupportive. So you see, it is not a wrong answer. They explain that the cartoonist is supportive. They're able to, the mother and daughter are able to work together, help her with the schoolwork. So it's not a wrong answer, but it may not be the best answer. Okay, and this particular, it is not supportive is actually the best answer. Now, there were cases of candidates who analyzed the reliability. That means they asked whether, is this source reliable? Is this a cartoon? But the question is not about asking whether the source is reliable. The source is asking about whether the cartoonist is supportive. So be very careful. Okay, be very mindful. Not everything needs to be cross-referenced. Okay, for this next question, the hybrid question, I want you to be really careful because there are a few things that I want you to take note of. Okay, first being you need to read both sources C and sources D together. All right, and if you look very carefully at sources C, it does show you a bit of positive aspect. At the same time, it does tell you about the negative aspect as well. Whereas if you read holistic source D, it's just really about how the whole working from home arrangement during COVID-19 is actually quite negative. Okay, so there are a few methods. One of the methods is when I say that source C makes source D surprising, I am looking at comparing content, identifying what is surprising and what is not. Method 2 is, of course, you are telling me that source C makes source D either surprise or not surprising due to cross-reference. And of course, this was quite unique for this particular sources and this particular year. And it can be a highest level where a unique answer was accepted. So I will go through method 1, method 2, method 3. Now, again, because this is a 7 marks question, a higher level answer would require cross-reference. Okay. However, method 1, where you just compare between surprising and not surprising just based on the content of the two sources, is also possible. So you need to see whether or not you understand the two sources and whether you could see the relevance when you cross-reference. So we are going to go through method 1, and method 1 is really about I want to compare the differences. Okay, and the reason differences is because it's surprising. Okay, something is surprising because the two sources don't match. That's why they are surprising. And if you look very carefully, let's read at source C. Source C does say that 62% in comparison to the 32% that says negative things, right? Okay, actually it seems quite positive. There's more people, even though only 110 professionals responded, but out of this 110, 62% feels that working from home has been good. Whereas source D seems to show that working from home has contributed to a lot of negativity, mental stress. In fact, it has worsened. So I am looking at source C makes source D surprising because they are different. So answer it like that. They are surprising because source C is more positive or has a more positive experience because of all these reasons. Okay, quote from source C, quote from source D. You can see that, because I'm saying that it's a different, so the word this differs or this is in contrast to. Okay, and this suggests that working from home is a negative experience, if you look at source D, due to the mental stressor arising from the blurring of work-life boundaries. So they are surprising because one says that it's more positive, the other one seems to say that it is definitely negative. Okay, we are still at method 1. And just now we talked about how source C makes source D surprising because they are different. Now, source C does not make source D surprising because there are similarities. And what are the similarities? If you see that source D is predominantly negative, so you must find a matching in source C to also show that it's negative. All right, and you can see it from this particular line that, working from home does bring about a lack of socialization. It does bring about isolation. It does bring about certain frustrations. And same thing with source D. There are certain frustrations with working from home. Okay, all these things are the frustrations. So how do you write it? So source C does not make source D surprising because both sources highlights the struggles. So what am I doing in this method one? I am still looking at the content of source C and source D, and source C does not make source D surprising because both of them have similar content, and both content actually talks about how there are struggles. Okay, and of course you must quote from both source again. All right, and tell me about source C, tell me about source D. Now, if you give me both sides of this, both surprised and not surprising, using method 1, then definitely out of 7, you can get perhaps a high of 4, 4 marks or even 5 marks. Okay, because you are not doing anything different. You are just looking at sources C as well as sources D. You will not get the highest marks because you never cross-reference. You never check about source C. Okay, so method 2 is the same thing. All right, method 2 is I am looking at why source C makes source D surprising is actually the differences. Okay, but you can see the one in blue here. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to justify by cross-referencing. I'm trying to see from another angle how I can support the differences by cross-referencing. So just now we have already established that, we are looking at source C, right? And then we say that, oh, source C is actually quite positive, whereas we say that source D is actually quite negative, and that's the reason why they are actually different. So if you look very carefully, the answers that I'm having just now is the same. Okay, I only added in the cross reference. And when you look at source E, okay, source E actually tells you the positive aspects. All right, so source C makes source D surprising because both of them are saying different things. Source C is saying positive, source D is saying negative. Okay, and it is surprising because when you look at source C, okay, it does tell you about the positive aspects of working from home. So it does justify that source C, whatever source C is saying, is actually opposite of whatever source D is claiming. All right, so that means source C is saying things are quite positive. So I need to cross-reference to another source that also shows surprising. And that is why I find source D very different from me. Okay, so take note of this. It is the same thing. You just have to cross-reference. It is surprising because source C is positive when I compare to source D. Source C is very positive, right? So I need to find another source that also supports source C in showing positive. That is why when I cross-reference to source, or when I compare to source D, it is actually surprising. So same thing when we look at source, why another method too, right? Why is it not surprising? Okay, um, we are looking at the similarity. Okay, so again, like just now, we actually compare that actually is not surprising because both of them are saying that there are negative experience of working from home. So what do I do next is I actually will cross-reference to a source that also tells you that, hey, it's not surprising because whatever is happening is the truth. And I cross-reference to source B that, working from home is negative. It can be distracting. So source C does not make source D surprising because both of them are similar in showing the struggles of working from home. And this struggle can be cross-referenced to another source. So the source that I picked was source B. Okay, so you can see that cross-reference may be a little bit confusing, but it is just something that you need to follow the flow. Okay, so again, source C does not make source D surprising because both of them are saying negative things about working from home, right? The pressure of working from home, the negative impact of working from home, and I cross-reference to another source that actually tells me that um, that source C is actually not surprising because it agrees that working from home is negative. So I need to cross-reference to a source to show that working from home is negative, and I chose source B. Now, how about method 3, the unique method that I was telling you? So the unique method of method 3 is actually to look at the timeline of the two sources. Now, if you look at the timeline, source C was mentioned in 2020, whereas source D is mentioned in 2021, which is 1 year after the whole process of working from home. So it actually is interesting because okay, so C responses here, the very fact that it's positive, is actually not surprising because this was taken at an earlier stage of working from home, whereas source D was taken at a later stage of working from home. Can you see that? Okay, so over a longer period of time, people may have felt more of the side effects. Their mental health may be affected, there are frustrations. So source C does not make source D surprising because they are of two different timelines. It's not surprising that people will feel positive because it's the initial timing of work from home. Whereas in source D, it is actually a year after. So of course, people will feel very differently. Okay, so the learning points, actually, you'd be very surprised that there was good effort made by candidates to compare content. So that means it wasn't so hard as you would think it is. The only thing is weaker responses only addresses source C or D. They didn't make a comparison. So remember, even if let's say you do not know how to do cross-reference, at least you must make sure that you compare. Source C makes source D surprising because of content. They are different in content. Source C does not make source D surprising because they are similar in content. Now, for the next question, which is the personal account question, one of the things that I thought was quite interesting was definitely you look at when you look at I would say the question itself, right? You know, was it saying that, oh, it is a personal account. Does this make the source, for example, less useful? So if you look very carefully here, okay, because it is a personal account, okay, is it unreliable? Can I not trust this particular source? Okay, and uh, looking at it very carefully, okay, look at all the positive aspects that they're saying about working from home. But there is this thing called a disclaimer. Now, why is it a disclaimer? Because this working from home only work for this particular person or this particular lady. Okay, and you can see there is a sense of neutrality. Okay, what do I mean by neutrality? Look at the source details that is highlighted in yellow. Okay, you can see that actually she also says that while I enjoy working from home, there are also benefits working in an office. So you can see that she's not being biased. Okay, even though that this is a personal account, she seems to be a bit more neutral, and she is taking 2 points of view or two perspective, right? So because of that, it is quite a useful source. Okay, so you can take a look. While source E is a personal account, it doesn't make it less useful. You can see that it is probably an account by a mother who enjoys the flexibility of working from home. It is useful because it does show all mothers that they must juggle. Okay, or it could be, it is useful because it provides insights for the government, okay, on how working from home actually affects individuals. Even though it's a personal account, perhaps because it is being posted in a magazine, it is for companies or government to consider allowing working from home and allowing the flexibility. Right? It is also useful because it gives a balanced perspective. Despite it being a personal account, it does tell you the pros and cons of working from home. So this is without cross-referencing. So you can see that I don't have a reliability statement here because I'm just looking at the source itself. Now, if I were to use cross-referenced, okay, you must remember that you pick the correct cross-reference definitely. So it is not useful because she only shares the positive aspect. And when you cross-reference to source B, remember source B where the woman didn't really have a very productive experience working from home. She was distracted. So this source is not useful because it only tells you the positive aspect. It doesn't tell you the negative aspect of working from home. Now remember, every time if I were to cross-reference, you must make sure that when you cross-reference, there is a reliability statement that you need. There is, I repeat, a reliability statement that you need. You must have this. Without this reliability statement, because you have cross-reference, right, your marks may be reduced, and it is an incomplete answer. So I hope you are very, very careful of that. So some learning points, as I mentioned just now, okay, students forgot to address the reliability of source E, or, there's no reliability statement. So what we're looking for is hence source E is reliable, hence useful. Please remember that. Please remember that. Okay, but most candidates actually had no problem in actually addressing this less useful. They were not confused by it. So, very good for the students who actually did in 2022. Okay, our favorite question, question 5. How far did the sources in the case study show that working from home has been a positive experience? So, first things first, you need to make sure that you make good choices in your selection of evidence. You must show awareness of the ample opportunities given in the case study to address both sides of the argument. So, what I'll be focusing is the source itself, since we understood the source, but we need to understand what is the extent of explanation, what is how you would answer the question, how you would always address the so what. All right, so we're going to take a look at all the sources. So from this particular source, remember source A, okay, so it does show you that working from home can be positive, can be negative, but it is a positive experience because at the end of the day, um, because we don't need to commute, it does keep a lot of the workers safe. So just simply the very fact that working from home is a positive experience because you are able to ensure safety for your health, safety for those of them who, are not working in the key sectors. Now, obviously, this particular source is quite easy. Working from home has not been a positive experience. There are potential distractions here. And obviously, if let's say you're distracted, there will, your work will be, the quality of your work will be affected. And there is always this sense of stress level. So just be very careful about that. Now, some sources will have both, will have the positive experience and the negative experience. Is it choose both? No, you choose just one of it. So if you decide to use this source as a positive source, then definitely you need to explain that how working from home has increased greater productivity because you are able to scope your job, uh, work, you understand when you work the best, when you work well, which time of the day, all right, and it's more conducive. But if you decide to do it negative, okay, choose this source as a negative experience, then you need to talk about the paragraph 2 here, all right, and how it exposes the person to long periods of isolation, which could perhaps lead to depression and a poorer standard of living. Now in source D, again, it is also a negative experience. So you can see negative impact on workers' health, both physical and mental, and definitely it has lead to worsening of health to the mental load. So quite easy for this particular source. Okay, working from home for this particular source has been positive because you are able to work from home, allow parents to have quality time with their children, improving bond, relationship, and they are able to be less stressed. So quite easy, it's quite direct. Just remember to make sure that you finish on time. Try to do two yes, two no. Okay, so for the SRQ, this is of course issue 2, living in a diverse society. Remember, when we look at extracts, we are supposed to use it as a trigger. So this particular extracts talks about harmony, especially between foreigners, okay, as well as citizens. And if you look at extracts 1, okay, question 6, it does talk to you about how, for example, harmony is important. Okay, so one reason only. Remember, you only have 15 minutes to actually do this particular question. So I want you to be slightly careful about that. Okay, so an example why we need to maintain harmony, right? It's because really economically it is very, very important. Okay, we need to continue to attract foreign workers. Foreign workers are also very valuable in terms of economic growth or social diversity, and we need harmony because we want to maintain that. If not, with social unrest, there'll be discrimination, there'll be tension, and it will cause even a greater negative impact. Okay, so for extracts 2 and 3, because this is about diversity, you can see that, extract 2, it talks about race. All right, give you some definition there as well as what is ethnicity. And it does tell you that sometimes it is the difference between either physical, it could also be about practices and customs. Here talks about socioeconomic status. It talks about different economic situations shared by groups. So you have maybe high income, middle income, low income, okay? And all these things, actually, the question is asking you for something. So what is the question asking you? All right, the question is asking you at the end of the day, how does this race and ethnicity as well as socio-economic status, how does it lead to a diverse society? Now, I want you to remember, if let's say, in the N level, you are only given a few more, you only left with a few more minutes, then you decide. Okay, be very mindful. It is an explain question. That means I need to look for the link. So even if you tell me, for example, socioeconomic status is the only thing you know. Okay, so how does a society that has both higher income, right, as well as lower income, how does it lead to a diverse society? It's because their experiences may be different. So that's why it will contribute to different lifestyles, different way of life, different food, different friends, group of friends also. Okay, so make sure that at least you don't leave it blank, you actually write something. So an example about race and ethnicity is the very fact that we have groups of Chinese, Malay, Indian, and even others, they all have different customs, different practices. And because they have different customs and different practices, obviously it will lead to a diverse society. Because sometimes, their diet is different. Some could require certain kind of food dietary, and because of that, it has led to a fusion food where certain food outlets, actually you can see, is so diverse because it is to cater to the needs of different races, different ethnicity. All right. Now, socioeconomic status, obviously, there is all these groups of people, and because of them, even the spaces where they lived, for example, all right, some may be living in a private property, some may be living in HDB. Now, because of where they lived, they will have different experiences. That means different way of life, different lifestyle, different friends. It does lead to a diverse society. So this is quite simple, actually, last year's paper, 2022. So you can see that you are able to do it. So don't be afraid, don't be scared. Make sure that you think through. I think the whole idea in 15 minutes and 20 minutes is just to think through how to answer the SRQ properly.